We are getting ready to go into fantastic caverns. Gonna go for a ride.
Doing good. Come on up.
Here we go, baby.
Whee! 2.5 miles an hour. The only drive-through cavern in Missouri. Isn't that cool? Whee! 2.5 miles an hour. The only drive-through cavern in Missouri. Isn't that cool?
The steam comes down these pipes, makes this piston go up and down, which makes that wheel turn, and then it makes that wheel turn, and that's the generator. This was really good because it actually put electricity in the cave back in 1887, and we were the only ones that had electricity anywhere west of the Mississippi. The problem with this is, though, if that fire goes out, so do those lights. So that's, they had to really be careful to keep that fire going so that the lights will stay on.
And look at those cool lights over there.
Hello. All right, everybody.
It's going to do it for you. So you need to watch your heads when you go under there. There's one more spot underneath there that I'm going to shine my light on too. It's going to warn you, everybody on the driver's side, you're going to have to lean over just a little bit farther down.
Okay.
Hunker down.
Yeah, game cover. Or something like that. Don't touch any rocks that might be.
Watch your head right here. One last spot.
Good.
I picked the good side.
Head breaker. Head breaker.
I mean, I'm like, the ceiling's right there.
Should be a height limit.
Called soda straws, and they're called that because they're actually hollow on the inside. Water's actually running through the middle of them, causing them to grow. Lots of them in here. When they get to be about 6 or 8 inches long, they actually close up on the inside. Then water starts running from the outside of them. And I'm going to show you some more of those at the next stop. These are all going to be stalactites at some point in time.
Stalactites.
Now, they're doing some cave tours, but 1930, you know what was going on then? The Great Depression. So
Yes.
there's not very many people could afford to do a cave tour at that time. So he came down here and he actually put 8 of these beds in here, and he was growing something that starts with an M.
Moonshine.
Well, at least you didn't say marijuana.
Mushrooms.
At least you didn't say marijuana.
Mushrooms.
Yes, mushrooms. But it's not mushrooms. Because mushrooms are a fungus and not a plant.
Correct.
And they grow best in the dark. And if the lights aren't on in here, you guys can see just how dark it is in here. And you're going to see even more up here.
Wow. This is huge.
Yeah. There's some serious spikes there.
They are.
Tubular, for sure.
This is water that's seeping into the cave through the cave wall and the cave ceiling, and it's got that really red rusty color because anytime cave water comes in through the dirt and then through the rock, it picks up minerals. And in this case, it's picking up the mineral of iron, giving it that really red rusty color. Up here you can see those little salt straws. Now they've gotten a little bit bigger there, and as they continue to grow, they will be full-fledged stalactites like you see here, and there's lots of them in here, all different sizes. These up here are not only called stalactites, but they're also called cave curtains or cave drapery. That's because the ceiling up there actually is at an angle. It's kind of slanted. And so the water's coming in the same way the ceiling is, giving that really thin formation there. This one down below is called the stalagmite, and that is growing because of the one that's dripping on it from above. You see the drips there? Now, this one and this one will reach each other someday, and when they do, they will become a column. They will be all of one piece. The stalactite up there you can remember because it holds tight to the ceiling. The stalagmite down here you can remember because someday it might reach that stalactite. Now, we have no idea how old actually a lot of these formations are. There's one problem up here at the next stop. That was a little bit of a mistake made in the cave. Well, actually, a large mistake made in the cave. But because of that mistake, there was actually a formation that started growing. So we know exactly how old that formation is that's up here. We're basing the rest of the stuff in this cave, the way it's growing, by the one that's growing back there. And that one is growing 1 cubic inch every 100 years. So this one here is growing 1 cubic inch every 100 years. Wow. What that means is if you come back in 100 years and see this one formation right here, the only difference it's going to look like is it's going to looks like it had a fresh coat of paint, and that is it. Now, when these two get together, which you know at that rate, that's going to be a really long time. And scientists say when they actually do meet each other, that you and I are technically going to be called dead. Okay, let's go up here. I'm going to show you that little mistake.
It is huge. We've never driven through a cave before. We've always had to walk.
We've done the boat one.
Yeah, did we do a boat one?
Yeah, we did that one.
I remember, but I can't remember where it is.
Somewhere in Missouri.
Yep. Whoa.
Either way, it's incredible. There's more of the flow.
Yes. So natural.
This little thing here was not supposed to be in the cave. We actually have gone underneath the parking lot, and we have gone across the street. We're in the hill across the street. Right now, we're 93 foot underground. Now, the man that owned that piece of property that's above us, he wanted to upgrade his house by putting a new well in, and he came down here with the cave owner, and they did some hillbilly calculations, some hillbilly measurements, and as you can see, there it is. They obviously, didn't do measurements too well because this pipe was supposed to have been 10 foot on the other side of that wall. But when their drill bit hit 93 foot right there and the drill bit dropped, they knew they had made a big oops. And so they got with the cave owner again. They came down here. The cave owner can see that it would, the hole in the ceiling was kind of up against the wall. Really wasn't going to hurt anything. It was kind of out of the way. So he decided to go ahead and let them keep drilling. They went down another 50 foot to hit water, and they went ahead and put the pipe in. He was more worried about them, having a hole in the ceiling, worried about them trying it again, and maybe they might have 2 holes in the ceiling. So he thought this would be safer just to let them go ahead and finish what they were doing. Now, there's two interesting things about this is, this well casing was put in 1941. It was a black well casing at that time. As you can see, it's not black anymore. The cave has kind of taken it in as its own, and it's completely covered it in what's called calcite. And it's got a little bit of mineral in it because it's kind of brownish in color. The longer that it's in here, the cave is actually going to continue to grow that on there, and then pretty soon, well, not pretty soon, a long time, it is going to look like it belongs in here because it's going to look like everything else in this cave. The other thing up there at the top that's interesting, those little strings you see, that's an oak tree that's above that has followed that pipe down. But those little formations you see there and running down the wall, that's the beginning of a cave curtain like we just seen at that last stop. Those little formations there started growing when this pipe was put in 1941. So that means those little formations there are 80 years old this year. Now, if it took them 80 years to get 3/4 of an inch, how long do you, just take a guess on how long you suppose that one took to make?
Thousands of years.
Well, thousands of years is a very good guess, but that's wrong. Because we don't really know how long it took. We have no idea. They say that the bigger the cave is, the older the cave. This would be considered a very large cave. So this cave is ancient. So we have no idea how long that took. Our handbook just says it took a very, very long time. And that's what I believe. Now, this next step we come up to, I'm actually going to show you what this cave is like in its natural state, which, you know what that is? Darkness.
There's the
Yes,
hole.
this is a very small hole. The next one is enormous. But actually, this is how, you know, when water comes in here. The other day, when it was raining so bad, the water was out here just over the bridge. But I have to tell you that in 2019, Memorial Day of 2019, we had a monsoon season in this area, and the water started coming up in these holes here, and it did not stop until the water was up to here. So that was way over top of the bridge, way over top of the railing, and that pretty much flooded this cave for a big time. And this cave that was taken, it took it almost a week for this hole and the next one here to take that water back out of here for it to flush out. Now underneath the bridge on this other one, deep underneath the bridge, that's actually where our cave animals live. We have a cave crawfish, a cavefish, and we have a salamander that lives in this cave. They all three are endangered species. They're tiny little things. Nobody goes down there except for scientists, and they go down there to kind of count their numbers once in a while to make sure that they're doing okay. And then that is why we really are happy when water does come into the cave, because that's the only way that the animals get their food. The food comes in through the water when it comes in. We just don't want it to flood the cave. Now back on the other side, there's the left side is the animals, but the right side, you can actually, it's large enough that you could crawl through on your stomach. And we had cave explorers come in here and do that. There is 3 miles of cave underneath us here. It's not large enough that we can drive. We can't even walk it. You'd have to crawl around on your stomach. Now, the cave explorers who went down there, they crawled down there for an hour and a half before they got to a spot that was large enough that they could stand up to turn around and come back. They actually called that the Paradise Room, but not because it was pretty. They were so relieved to not have to back up for an hour and a half, and they could actually turn around right there. So they were pretty joyed at that one. Now, if they ever start a list of people who want to go down there and crawl around on the bottom of the cave to explore it, my name's not going to be on it. About every 2 years, and that's okay with us. You can see the rushing through the water in here. When this spring was full, you couldn't see it. It just looked like a big glass of chocolate milk in here until it started draining out, and then it looked like a little whirlpool like this going on. Wow. We're going to go up here and tell you a little bit more about how the animals in the cave, and a little bit more about how the water comes and goes, and then we'll turn around and go back.
At the whole drainage system, and it's going to be a good day for doing it because we have had a lot of rain in the past couple days. Why the spring is so large. That's the way the water gets in. And of course, that's not only does water get in that way, that's the way food gets in for the cave animals, and contaminants get in too.
So you might want to watch your head or watch your mouth.
Alright, head raiser. Head raiser.
A lot of famous people playing on this stage at the time. The radio that was broadcast on KGBS, which is a radio station in Springfield. But they had a very family that was very musical. And that family come out here and they played on here every single Saturday night. It was the show was called Farmerama. And they got to be so popular, they actually took their act down to Branson. They were one of the very first theaters down in Branson that started, and their names were the Presleys. And in case you know them, they actually started on this stage, and they played on this stage for about 3 years before they got to be so popular. If you see them again, you can say, hey, I see where you guys started. Now, this is why John Knox kept this cave quiet for the 5 years that he did. Because in 1862, do you know what was going on in this country at that time?
Civil War.
The Civil War. Civil War was going on. And not very far from here, there is a place called Wilson's Creek Battlefield, over to the west of us. A lot of bloody battles over there. That meant there was lots and lots of soldiers in this area. The soldiers looked for caves, mainly because most caves in Missouri, and there's over 7,000 caves in Missouri, but most caves have little brown bats hanging from the ceiling. Now we do not. We don't know why. We do have some bats in here. They're tiny little tricolored bats, about the size of your thumb, teeny tiny. They do not hang from the ceiling. They kind of hide the sides of the cave, but most caves in Missouri do have little brown bats, and they kind of hang in a cluster together for body heat. And you know, when you've had bats in a cave for generations, you can just imagine the piles of dew that was down below. Well, actually, that is what the soldiers were after. They're looking for something that is called saltpeter. And the saltpeter is what is in the soil that has the bat guano in it. And so they would come into the caves, and they actively look for caves in Missouri. And they would come into the cave, and they would build these things. This is called a leaching vat. They would probably build 5 or 6 of them into a cave. And then they would come in and they would dig up all that dirt that has that bat guano in it. And they would fill these big leaching vats with that dirt. Then they would take a bucket of water and they would pour it over all that dirt. Now that's why it's called, called a leaching vat. Because when they put that water in there, that water would leach through that dirt. And they had to wait probably 2 or 3 days for the water really to start coming out. And it came into a bucket down below. Now they would probably have waited till they had several buckets of it. And then they went outside the cave where they had an enormous fire over a huge pot outside the cave. And they would pour that kind of sludgy water into that pot. And they would wait till that pot started getting hot and start to boil. And eventually that water would completely boil away. The only thing left in the bottom of that pot would have been a white crystally substance. And that's actually what's called saltpeter. That's what's in the ground that they were looking for. Now they would scrape that out of the bottom of that pot, and they would add a little bit of sulfur with it and a little bit of potash and mix it up together. And what do you suppose that made? Gunpowder.
Yeah.
Gunpowder. And you know what? They're in the middle of a war. So that gunpowder, finding a cave that had the bats in it so they could get the saltpeter, was almost like them finding gold. Their guns did not work without gunpowder, so it was kind of important. Now, John Knox kept the cave quiet because he did not want either side to find the cave, because they would have taken the cave away from him. They would have confiscated it. But not only that, they would have also taken his home that was nearby, and they used his home kind of like a field hospital. They would take all their wounded and put it into the beds in his home, and he would just be out. And then if he had any kind of cattle in the field, they had the ultimate authority to kill all of the cattle and feed all of their men. So by John Knox keeping the cave quiet at the time that he did, he probably saved his cave, he saved his home, he saved his cattle, and had he resisted them at the time, if he'd have tried telling them no, they probably would have just shot him and took everything anyway. So he probably did the right thing. He probably saved his life by keeping this cave quiet. And you know, this cave does not have any brown bats in it, but the soldiers wouldn't have known that. And they would have come in there and probably dug the heck out of this cave looking for something that was not here, because you have to have the brown bats guano at the bottom to get the saltpeter, and there is none in here. Now, when he let those girls come in 1867, he did that because the Civil War was over. By 1867, the fighting had stopped. And so he probably felt comfortable in letting people come in here now because, you know, he knew he wasn't going to lose everything. Rose and fell and did it several times. And then all the rock in that ceiling there, it got so saturated with water that when the water finally went out for the last time, the ceiling had no water to support it, and so the ceiling gave away. And it actually collapsed. And you're going to see the collapse in there. They call it the breakdown. And you know that it's probably never going to happen again because most of it is on the ground now. And the formations at the top when we drive through, you're going to see the formations are big ones like this. Well, remember, those formations grow a cubic inch every 100 years. So you can tell by going through them and looking up at the ceiling that it has been a very long time since the last time the ceiling gave away for the last time. We're going to take you up there and pull through there. And not only is it low, it's jagged. So if you wanted to hit your head, just don't do it right here. That would hurt. And the rock around this corner here, this rock is also very low. In fact, this rock here is called the Missouri Noggin Knocker.
Missouri Noggin Knocker.
Really low. It gets a lot of people. But actually it's not, because even after the ceiling collapsed in here, the water continued to come into this cave, and the water has actually fused all of this together. So if you were to go up there and touch this, it would feel like it's just cemented into spot, which it is, because the water has fused it together all in one piece right here. This next spot we go into, everybody needs to look up because there's actually thousands of stalactites right in one area. Makes the ceiling look just beautiful. And we're only about 30 foot underground right here, so we're probably underneath your cars right now. More than a coffee can. It's got a wire for a handle. And if the people who came in and did their tours with just candles, you can see, you know, how much light that gave them. But we think that the girls had something called a lantern, which is like this. And this coffee can with the handle, look what happens when you put this candle inside the can. It actually becomes a flashlight. And actually, this is pretty impressive how much light this thing puts out just by putting the candle in there. And actually, the candle now is protected because if there's any drips in the cave, it's not going to drip and put the candle out. Wow. Now, I'm going to go around the corner here. I'm actually going to show you the path that the girls took.
What they could have seen with no more than that lantern.
Now, we know that the girls came in way up here in the right-hand corner. So the path that they would have taken in this cave would have been the path that I'm walking right here. This is what they could have seen. And you know, if there was 12 girls, if they all had a lantern, there would have been quite a bit of light in here with this. But you know, if they could have seen it the way you guys can see it today, how much more impressed would they really have been, you know? These are called the twins, and they are actually 20 foot tall. They are the largest formations in the cave. And matter of fact, everything in here now as we go out are the largest formations. And so those girls actually call this the Hall of Giants. formation up around the corner here that's actually called the spiral staircase. I think it looks like an ice cream cone, but you guys can decide. This area actually is very, very active. Let me show you the drips, because we're so close to the ceiling here. Look at all the drips on those things. All of them are actively growing. Wow. Now, when I pull out of here, I'll go real slow so you can take pictures. But I'm going to also go very slow because I have to hug this wall so that this trim misses that formation there. Watch your heads. We're going to go low right now. Watch your heads.
Oh, cool. We're hunkering. Oh my goodness.
Hold my head in your lap.
Woo!
Now over here on the right-hand side, you guys, where the dog went in, right there, that's the hole.
Oh, wow.
And that's actually where the girls had to crawl in through on their stomachs. And everybody who wanted to do a tour after that, they had to go in through that same little hole right there. That's 3.5 foot wide by 1.5 foot tall.
And Melody did a great job. We had a lot of fun and got a complimentary photo. This is flash fried spinach with cheese and lemon sauce. Oh my lands, it's so good. You'd think it'd be crispy because it's flash fried, but it like melts in your mouth.